This is Adam Taxin with the audio version of Daniel Greenfield's column for Friday, July 6th, 2012. Friday afternoon roundup, red and green all over. Daniel's columns can be found at sultankanish.blogspot.com. Here is Friday afternoon roundup, red and green all over. First section, a few statistics. 31% of Americans give Obama a positive grade on handling economic issues. 36% of Americans, about 80 million people, believe UFOs exist. If aliens arrived at their doorstep, 22% of that 36% would try to befriend the alien. 15% would run away, 13% would lock their doors, and only 2% would try to inflict bodily harm. The other 48% would vote him in as president. Opposing compulsory health insurance purchases is just like slavery. This is the next section. If you oppose Obamacare, you might as well buy a slave, work him into his old age, and then abandon him by the side of the road, or something. No, really. Frank Harris III at the Hartford Courant says so. I'll skip the part where I fisk his thesis because it's too easy and it avoids dealing with larger pathology displayed in the article. Talking about slavery makes folks uncomfortable. It was so long ago. I know, and doggone it, Frank, what do you mean doing what you are about to do? Proclaim those jilted Republicans as acting out a slave-era legacy in their opposition to the Supreme Court's ruling that found Obamacare constitutional. Those who had the least suffered the most when it came to health then, just as they do today. Life expectancy for the poor, and who was poorer than a slave, was far below that of whites. Life expectancy for blacks today remains and has always been lower than whites. Infant mortality is high too. It's 2012, and Republicans seem determined to rally their supporters against health care like the Confederacy rallied its citizens against the North's efforts to destroy their slave-based way of life. End quote. Let's unpack the reasoning here. Blacks were slaves. 1. Blacks were slaves then, and we didn't take care of their health. 2. We are still not taking care of their health. Connecting A to B is the work of a man who on some level still sees black people as slaves who need to be saved and taken care of because they cannot take care of themselves. Liberals rarely put forward this formula quite so openly, but it's at the heart of the old elitist liberalism. Harris is accusing us of being irresponsible slave owners. We aren't taking care of our black people. Think about the Emancipation Proclamation, think about Juneteenth and the 4th of July, and think about the whole rotten assumption that rather than setting everyone free, what we really need is a massive slave state for everyone, built on the power of guilt. Think about the contempt for black people who are being treated as if they have no ability to take care of themselves. And think about how pervasive this reasoning is in liberal thinking. Harris accuses us of protecting a slave-based way of life. But who really has the slave-based way of life? Is it the people who want slaves or the people who don't want slaves? Is it the people who believe that we should be free or the people who believe we should be subservient to the proper authorities who will care for us? The assumption made by Harris is the same one made by slave owners, that black people cannot care for themselves. That they must be wards for their own good. Post-slavery, the argument becomes that we must all be wards for the good of black people. How much of the welfare state squats on the obscene proposition that black people are unable to take care of themselves? How much of the misery and troubles of black people in America comes from all the do-gooders who have helped wreck their finances and communities with freebies, subsidies, privileges, and leaders who want nothing more than to control where the freebies go? How many black children have been snatched away from their families to be raised by benevolent white people? How many imported from Africa for the same purpose? Does it end at our borders? Absolutely not. How many articles have there been written about the damage done to Africa's domestic industries by the volumes of aid sent there by Westerners? Textiles, construction, and agriculture are in trouble because Africa is swamped with foreign aid by white people who want to take care of all the black people who can't take care of themselves. Do that anywhere, and it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more people are treated as unable to fend for themselves, the less likely they are to fend for themselves, and the more charity they need until the process becomes completely unsustainable. Turning an entire race into charity cases should be considered a war crime instead of a humanitarian act. Building a system of political rule based on an entire race being treated as a charity case is racism and tyranny mixed together into an ugly combination, and yet it is the basis for liberal political power. Next section. It's another democratic triumph for the Arab Spring. Libya's top politicians have hatched a deal that would see the Muslim Brotherhood lead the government after the country's first free elections in almost 5 decades takes place on Sunday. Aren't you glad Obama fought an illegal war in blatant violation of the War Powers Act for this? Just wait until he pulls the same trick in Syria. 2 countries under the Brotherhood already, and Hussein O. won't stop until he makes it 3, using what's left of the military after his rape of the armed forces. Next section. Good news from Syria. Quote, Iraq's top diplomat on Thursday said he had solid information that al-Qaeda militants were crossing from Iraq to Syria to carry out attacks, warning of a violent spillover that could shake the Middle East. End quote. It's almost like Assad isn't the worst-case scenario or something. Next section. Isn't this how the Tea Party got started? Quote, when ordinary folks start standing up for themselves, start making their voices heard, start coming together, start believing again, nothing can stop us. End quote. President Obama in Maumee, Ohio, earlier today. Ordinary folks standing up for themselves and making their voices heard is how O lost his congressional majority and why his election is endangered. Does he really want to encourage more of it? That bulletin was posted by Salim Zimet, digital organizer at Obama for America. Next section. Betting on America in a bus made in Canada. Barry the Gambler is hitting the road in his Betting on America tour, and he's really connecting with the farmers and workers of the nation with speeches like this. Quote, when the American auto industry was on the brink of collapse and more than 1 million jobs were on the line, Governor Romney said we should just let Detroit go bankrupt. I refused to turn my back on communities like this one. I was betting on the American worker, and I was betting on American industry. And 3 years later, the American auto industry is coming roaring back. That Chrysler plant up the road bringing on another 1,100 employees to make the cars that the world wants to buy. End quote. Chrysler is actually Fiat now, so it's an Italian car company with plants in America. How is that any different than Toyota, which is a Japanese car company with plants in America? And Barry is betting so hard on America that his Betting on America bus tour is happening in a bus made in Canada. Maybe Gamblin' Barry has a fallback position. Prime Minister of Canada. There's good news for Barry Hussein in this regard. Canada allows foreign-born prime ministers. As long as he gets citizenship, he can start betting on Pakistani workers or Canadian workers or French workers. Next section. If only there was some way we could have the advanced educational system of Saudi Arabia. Quote, America will never tap into educational innovation and ingenuity without looking at the model that we have in our madrasas, in our schools where innovation is encouraged, where the foundation is the Quran. End quote. Representative Andre Carson, Democrat, Indiana. It's a pity that thus far America has not managed to tap into the educational innovation and ingenuity that has made Muslim countries into world leaders in technology and beating women. If only we had a system of education based on the ravings of a 7th century warlord, then we could truly tap into the best that 7th century Arabia had to offer the world, like believing in jinns and drinking camel urine as a curative. Oddly, despite the backwardness of our educational system, Saudi and Pakistani students seem to flock here for a higher education. Maybe they feel sorry for us, or maybe we just have a lot of tall buildings for them to study while taking flight lessons. Who knows? Next section. So long as he doesn't get thrown under it. Quote, New Bedford man wins bus ride with President Obama, end quote. With all the prizes and contests where the prize is spending time with O, when are we going to get win Obama's job? Next section. I bet he believes it now. A Norwegian jihadist thought to have received al-Qaeda training in Yemen was previously a left-wing radical who refused to believe that Osama bin Laden's network carried out the September 11th terrorist attacks. Next section. The 6 steps of an Islamic courtship. Step 1. He told me that he had started liking me and that I should convert to Islam and marry him. Step 2. He started criticizing Christians for not observing the purdah, covering of women, and of following our own brand of religion. Step 3, he was acting like a madman. He started cursing my family and even tried to set the house on fire. Step 4, Adnan raped me while his friend filmed the entire incident. They ruined my life completely. Step 5, at first he demanded that I convert to Islam, and only then would he consider forgiving me for refusing his proposal. Step 6, he turned up at my home and showed the film to my parents. He then told my shocked family that they had no other option but to hand me over to him. He told them that he owned me now. Next section. America's first one drop of blood president. Quote, "First thing that always pops into my head regarding our president is that all of the people who are setting up this barrier for him, they just conveniently forget that Barack had a mama, and she was white. Very white American, Kansas, middle of America," Freeman said. "There was no argument about who he is or what he is. America's first black president hasn't arisen yet. He's not America's first black president. He's America's first mixed-race president." End quote. So maybe next time we can do a DNA test to make sure that the man we vote for has absolutely no white blood cells in him and is as racially pure as Morgan Freeman wants him to be. Next section. Syrian refugees are the new Palestinian refugees. Quote, Hazifa, another refugee from Homs, lives in Badawi, a Palestinian refugee camp north of Tripoli. She said 20 family members who have also fled the conflict sleep in the apartment, crowding the floor with thin mattresses. "Here in Badawi, the houses are cheapest," she said. End quote. Give her another month, and she'll be collecting UNRWA money and brandishing giant keys from her true home in a village in Israel. No wonder the number of, quote, Palestinian refugees keeps growing. Next section. One left-wing corruptocrat helps out another. Quote, "The Mexican people are more stunned than excited by Enrique Peña Nieto's apparent victory in Sunday's presidential election. No one has taken to the streets to celebrate the return of the old party of the Institutional Revolution, PRI. To the contrary, thousands of youth congregated at the Revolution Monument in downtown Mexico City to protest against the imposition of Peña Nieto through media manipulation, vote buying, and ballot tampering. Meanwhile, waves of people who sold their vote to the PRI on Sunday in exchange for gift cards flooded local supermarkets on Monday to cash in on their payments. Peña Nieto is heading down the same road. Instead of waiting for the official results, he has already started to put together his transition team and presents himself in the U.S. media as president-elect. This is false self-representation. According to Mexico's highly sophisticated electoral laws, only the Electoral Tribunal can name a candidate president-elect after a full review of the legality of the election. And preliminary reports suggest that thousands of irregularities have tainted the results. But President Obama has agreed to play Peña Nieto's game. On Monday, Obama called the Mexican candidate to congratulate him prematurely for his, quote, victory, end quote. Why wouldn't Obama support another corrupt leftist thug? And Nieto's tactics, including a preemptive transition, look a lot like Obama's tactics. Anyone remember Obama's pre-presidential seal? Next section. So many spokespeople and nothing to say. Quote, "For the first time this campaign cycle, President Obama is being accompanied by two spokespeople, one for the presidency and one for the campaign. White House Press Secretary Jay Carney and new traveling campaign press secretary Jen Psaki tag-teamed the gaggle with reporters on Air Force One on Thursday. Carney took questions on the administration's filing of a trade complaint against China, not politically motivated, he says, and Psaki interjected slights against Mitt Romney, who opposed a similar complaint in 2009, she says." End quote. Counting the teleprompter, that's 3. Next section. Just close your eyes and think of Syria. U.S. must arm Syria rebels despite Islamists. Opposition, that's a headline. Now here's a quote. Islamists are among the most effective fighters against the Syrian leadership, some opposition figures said, and Washington needs to know that while these rebels are conservative Muslims, they are a far cry from Afghan-style jihadi militants, end quote. Well, that's good. We just close our eyes and think of Syria, not Afghanistan, except, quote, "An al-Qaeda-inspired group claimed responsibility for dozens of attacks across Syria," end quote. While they are effective, what else do we need to know? Next section. Well, that fixes it. Quote, "The parents of a Muslim university student convicted of a religiously motivated attack on young Jews said, 'Our son is no racist.' Mohammed Khalifa, 19, was fined for hurling eggs and yelling, 'Oi, Jews,' and effing Jews at passers-by while driving his brother's BMW through Golders Green with 3 friends. But his father, a pediatrician, today claimed the victims had misheard, and the students had shouted, 'Oi, you!' End quote. It's nice that in the midst of Islamophobic Britain, where Muslims are routinely persecuted, Mo's father can still manage to own a BMW. Next section. I don't know why it's so hard to believe. Headline, Muslims are well integrated in Britain, but no one seems to believe it. That's from The Guardian. Headline, London 2012 Olympics. Muslim converts held over games plot. That's from The Telegraph. Next and final section, Ori L'Tzedek, Tav HaYosher, and BDS. Left-wing fake Orthodox group Ori L'Tzedek is talking about its Tav HaYosher union certification. Meanwhile, Elisheva Goldberg, its Rosh Beit Medrash, is promoting BDS and boycotts of Israel at Peter Beinart's blog. How many restaurants who display the Tav HaYosher certification are comfortable with a group, one of whose leading members promotes boycotts of Israel? Next time you see a Tav HaYosher certificate in a restaurant, you might want to ask the owner that. The end.